I'm Iain Bradley, Head of Data Modernisation Division in the Department for Education. This short film is intended to help schools with their own preparations for GDPR. General Data Protection Regulation replaces the Data Protection Act. Much of it is similar in that it covers the safe processing and usage of personal data. There is a stronger focus on demonstrating compliance with the regulation though. And GDPR also has special categories of personal data, things like ethnicity and religion, many of which we use within the education sector, so we need to be really careful about how we use and process that personal level data. So the personal data ecosystem is a term we use for understanding where you store personal data and in particular how those systems might interlink. Within education, there's loads of different types of systems where this might be. Within the ecosystem, you've got your core management information system, you've got curriculum tools, you've got payment systems, and you've got virtual learning environments, which is one set of systems that people will be quite familiar with, particularly senior leaders. But you've also got things like catering management, safeguarding, communication tools that you might use for parent communications, the school transport and school trips. You've also got to think about where you might store data within school uniform systems and school photographs, things like that. Schools might also use identity management systems or things that contain biometric data, which are a key part of the new regulation. But also think about where your office documents are stored and your core IT infrastructure. Finally, when trying to create that ecosystem, think about where you actually send data to. So that might be interactions with health or social care, it might be sending data up to a multi-academy trust or the local authority, or it might be sending data to the department itself. And finally, that all covers personal data about pupils and potentially parents, but also think about your workforce. So there's three things to think of. People who apply for jobs and what data you hold about people who've applied for jobs, your current employees who are working with you at present, and people who've perhaps left the organisation as well. You'll have personal data about all of those people probably, and that all needs to be in scope. In order to map your ecosystem, start with those headings we've just described up around the room. Note down every single system or data store that might be relevant under those headings. Ideally, you can also draw the data flows between systems. Then you've got a really good illustration of your own data ecosystem. Once you've got that, you can then start to focus on the 6 key questions that you need to understand about those systems or data stores in order to be able to demonstrate GDPR compliance. Scope. Which personal and special category data items are contained within that system? Sharing. Does any personal data flow from that system onto anywhere else? Retention. What is the system's data retention policy? Does it align to the data retention policies needed to fulfil your duties as a school? And is this clear within your contract with the supplier? Access. How would you get the information for a subject access request out of that system? Security. How does the system ensure the security of the personal data held? What recognised standards are in place? And finally, own readiness. Is this system supplier confident that they will be GDPR compliant by May 2018? How will they demonstrate that to you? You may know that information already. You may need to look on the supplier's websites. They might be communicating this to you directly, or you may need to ask them. There are also some commercial or non-commercial organisations who are starting to aggregate this information for schools as well. Once you've got that information together, you can put it together into a clearly structured table. In making sure that table is complete, where are the risks? There's 2 top tips that schools have been telling me about. Firstly, check for software that's not on the SLT's radar. For example, subject-specific software. The key here is to involve all staff in the development and checking of that ecosystem diagram. And secondly, think again about onward flow from systems. Do you have any software that sits on an MIS and shares data with other systems? Do you know what they all are and what data goes where? Do these systems store data, and if so, do you know where that is? The Data Protection Officer needs to be highly knowledgeable about data protection and GDPR. They need to understand the school's operations and policies. It's their job to promote a strong culture about protection of data. They also need to be aware of compliance, obligations, promote the training and processing and conducting of internal audits. They need to be able to report directly to the board and conduct data protection impact assessments and determine when they're necessary. All in all, perhaps crucially under GDPR, that the head of IT or the head teacher probably has a slight conflict of interest in that if they're setting up the ecosystem and assessing it, they're kind of marking their own homework. So, what might some solutions be? You could realign responsibilities within your current team, creating the DPO role within your team that is sufficiently removed from those making technology or processing decisions. You could collaborate, share the DPO function between a group of schools, or share expertise by being the DPO for each other's school. You could contract. It is possible to buy in the DPO function for your school or for a group of schools. Finally, seeking volunteers from experts that may exist in the wider school community is an option. It is possible, but note that as a volunteer, their statutory responsibilities remain at the same expectation as a paid DPO. It would be a reasonably big commitment for that volunteer, and they would need to be able to influence senior managers' decision making in exactly the same way as a paid DPO. In drawing, understanding and documenting the data ecosystem, as well as exploring the DPO role, we've started to get the foundations right for GDPR compliance. In our next communication, we'll be talking about how you start to communicate that to parents and pupils, the conditions that you can rely on for processing within education, as well as a hot topic that we know about data retention periods.